Dominic Eorio. Work with Carrier Commercial Controls. I'm the Contractor Program Manager. Today we're going to talk about what BACnet means to me. Okay, and the intent of this presentation is to guide you, a facility manager, facility owner, or contractor, as to what BACnet means to you. What are the benefits of BACnet to you? We hear a lot of buzzwords through the industry, a lot of terminology that sometimes we hear and we know, but we don't necessarily know what they mean. So hopefully I'm going to guide you through what BACnet means to you. So I thought it important to start with the learning objectives. If you read the description of the presentation, the learning objectives that I laid out for you was what I hope to provide you through this presentation is how to receive the benefits of an open platform control system. What you need to think about before turning over or before receiving a control system through turnover, ensure you have the necessary information in order to own that control system for its life and prevent a forced marriage. Okay? Preventing a forced marriage not only with your manufacturer, the manufacturer of your product, but also with the contractor that installs it. Okay? How I intend to get you there. Through the agenda, we're going to first talk about the evolution of a BAS, the evolution of a building automation system. Now, really quickly, I want to say, if you hear acronyms, we have a lot of acronyms in our industry. I'm sure you hear them all the time. Don't necessarily always know what they mean. So if you do hear an acronym and I don't describe it and you're confused about it or you'd like me to explain it, please stop me and raise your hand. Okay? Don't hesitate. So the evolution of a BAS, building automation system. What makes an open system open? Okay, again, this is a buzzword in our industry, an open system. But what truly makes a system open? And project turnover considerations, things you need to think about before you receive your control system, before you take ownership of it. Okay, so we're going to start with the evolution of a BAS, building automation system. All right, well, it all began with the thermostat. All right, we remember those days. It was a rooftop. A thermostat was very simple. Every thermostat could work on every rooftop unit. Any technician could get the information, the sequence of operation, the guidelines, the installation and operation manual. Very, very simple times. Very easy for us all to work with and deal with. But with the thermostat, there were many opportunities for improvement. From a facilities manager's perspective, having local control in the space was a good thing, but it was also a bad thing. Okay, we had things like Thermostat Wars. We all know these as multiple people on one thermostat, and everyone thinks it's their own personal obligation to adjust the set point for their own personal comfort. So we call those Thermostat Wars. The problem with Thermostat Wars, besides the fact that it creates a very uncomfortable situation for the tenant, for the occupants in the space, is it also creates a very inefficient operation for the building manager, building owner. The unit could go into heating in the middle of summer because they set the temperature too high, or the system could operate in cooling all night long, causing the coils to freeze and damaging the compressor. So we need to eliminate that local control, or at least have the ability. As far as scheduling, scheduling a system, scheduling without a BAS, you're forced to walk to the local thermostat, make the adjustments. Again, it's local control, so anybody can make those adjustments, not necessarily the right people making the adjustments. What happens when you go on holiday? Christmas week comes up and the whole building is closed. You have to walk around every thermostat, make the adjustments, and then when you come back, walk around again, do it again. So we have the ability to improve this situation. Well, certain manufacturers saw the opportunity for improvement, and they began to develop what we called field-installed, field-applied controls. Field-installed, field-applied controls provided us a lot of those benefits that we were missing before. Now we have the ability to lock down those sensors or lock down those thermostats, prevent local adjustment. We have the ability to add zoning. Okay? We have one rooftop feeding multiple offices or multiple spaces. We want to put dampers in to allow the airflow to be controlled to the spaces that need the airflow and not the spaces that don't. Again, the scheduling, remote access. Now we have the ability to log in remotely and find out what's happening with our system. like I said, we're on holiday. What happens if the heating goes down? We don't know about it for a week. We have frozen pipes. And then network communication. And the network communication allows for some advanced system strategies. Okay? The network communication, now just to explain this, so with this field installed controls application, every piece of equipment got a controller. That controller was field installed. That also meant the controller was a dumb controller when it was put into the unit, which meant that custom programming had to be performed in order to get that controller to perform the function. Okay? That custom programming, in many times, was limited to knowledge only to the person that installed it. Now, as far as the communication was proprietary. The term proprietary meaning that only the manufacturer that designed it knew how to communicate in that protocol or that language. Okay, and to take a step back just to make sure everyone understands it, basically a communication protocol is like a language. In generic terms, it's a language, much like English. I'm speaking English, you all understand English, which is a good thing. Last week I spoke at AHR Mexico, so that was a little bit of a challenge, but a good reference for our presentation. Since we all speak English, we can all communicate with each other, and that allows communication from one device to another without any sort of a translator or a gateway. These devices all speak the same language, and they can speak to each other very easily. But with that proprietary protocol, that proprietary communication, that limited anyone else's ability to communicate on that network. Okay? Now, as I said, with disadvantages, system complexity. Because the program was written custom on that project, only the person programming it understands how it works. Okay? It's also not necessarily repeatable. What happens if you add 2 more rooftops later on and that technician no longer works for the company? Who's going to write the program? Is it going to be the same program? Is it going to operate the same way you expect and know? As far as service options, you have limited service options because, again, it's a custom program. Not everything is documented. Not everything is written down. Not all the points lists are not all provided to the people that need it. Okay? And it also offers the ability to, or provides an avenue for finger pointing. Okay? Now we have an equipment provider and we have a controls provider. Whose fault is it? I'm sure you've all experienced the finger pointing at some point or another, whether it's in our industry or not. It's not my fault. The equipment's fine. It's the controls. It's not the controls. They're closing the relays. It's the equipment. We need to eliminate some of that. We needed to eliminate some of that finger pointing. So that opened the door for the the factory installed controls movement. And the factory installed controls movement essentially was manufacturers looked at their equipment and said, hey, we make this equipment. Who knows how to control this equipment better than us? Okay? We put down on our product data sheets the specifications for our equipment, the efficiency that we expect our equipment to operate. We have our name on the equipment. Who knows better how to control our equipment than us? We can employ the engineers on staff. They can write the programs. They can document the sequences. They could put together flow charts. They could provide points lists. They could provide everything that is necessary in the field for anybody to service this piece of equipment and be successful. They also provided that repeatability because now every unit is going to be controlled the same. Now, it also provided an improved cost position because now we're looking at, we have factory installed controls. The equipment manufacturer has an assembly line. They're putting together the coils, the compressors, all the soldering. Now they can pre-engineer a location for the controller, and they can build pre-custom or pre-designed wiring harnesses to just plug in the controllers and make the system operate very, very efficiently, and it's all located at one station instead of carrying stuff across the roof. But there were still disadvantages, okay? As I said before, we still have this proprietary communication bus, and then equipment manufacturers also spoke proprietary because we didn't have open protocols at that time. We didn't have the open protocol movement. So with that, we needed these additional protocol gateways. Now, gateways completely eliminated this improved cost position because now we have an additional device that has to translate. And now I go back to my translation, my languages. Assume this is English and this is Spanish. We have to have a language translator in between the Spanish network and the English-speaking device. Okay? This also increases or adds points of failure, potential points of failure. If this fails, your system doesn't work. If this fails, your system doesn't work. If this fails, your system may not work. So we've added another point of failure by adding this gateway. Okay, we still have a single controls provider at the network level. Because it's still a proprietary network, it's still a proprietary bus, only the installer of this bus can work on the system, service it, and provide additional hardware for it. There's still, actually we've increased the finger pointing now, because now not only do we have this device speaking one language and this network speaking another, but now we also have this gateway. Who owns the gateway? Is that a third company coming in? So now the equipment manufacturer is pointing the finger at the protocol translator, or the controls contractor is pointing at the protocol translator. So now as an owner, this just adds layers of complication and makes it even more limited as to who can service your facility. Which moves us into the day of the open protocol movement. The open protocol movement, it's not that old in comparison to our industry, but the open protocol movement was an effort to eliminate a lot of those issues that we talked about before. Okay, we want to eliminate the proprietary nature of this bus. We no longer want the building owner to be married to the manufacturer, the hardware manufacturer, the controls network manufacturer, either. As a building owner, you should have ultimate choice as to who goes into your building, what products go into your building, and what functions those products perform. Now that the open protocol movement exists, product manufacturers have the ability to actually build the open protocol right into their hardware. So we can eliminate those additional costly gateways, eliminating finger pointing, eliminating points of failure, and eliminating cost. Okay? We also have the ability now, single network with user interface and multiple vendors. We could provide one single unit user interface, one single workspace that allows you to log in and see your entire facility at any given point in time and bring it all back to the one front end. But as far as disadvantages, I didn't want to put any disadvantages. I'm going to tell you what they are in a minute, but I just wanted to see if, and I want to give you a chance to think through possible disadvantages you may see at this point. Yes?
Each manufacturer still likes to use their own different points for different things. There's not currently a BACnet protocol where you can go out and look for an XYZ point, and it's going to be zone temperature in every unit. You're still hunting for what that is for that manufacturer, what that is for that equipment, and sometimes it changes from equipment to equipment.
Absolutely. That is definitely one of the problems we have here. And to take that even further, you mentioned BACnet, but we haven't even decided on BACnet at this point. We're still looking at 3 or 4, maybe even more open protocol possibilities, which means every manufacturer gets to choose which protocol they speak. And that's not a bad thing. Choice is a good thing. The problem is, as an owner, you want to have the ultimate decision. You want to have the ultimate choice. But if one manufacturer speaks BACnet, another manufacturer speaks LAN, another manufacturer speaks Modbus, then you still don't have the ultimate choice that you were hoping for. So we're still at that disadvantage where we haven't really decided what direction to go. So this is a while ago still. This isn't quite where we are today, but that's also a very good point that still I think can be cleaned up a little further, to be quite honest. But that moves us into the... Oh, there it is, sorry. That moves us into the BACnet era, the era of BACnet, okay? BACnet started to become the main choice of most manufacturers. Why? Well, several reasons. One, it was built for building automation controls networks. It's actually in the name. BACnet stands for Building Automation Controls Network. It was built by ASHRAE, and we all know and love ASHRAE. We know what the benefits of ASHRAE are. Okay, so unlike some of the other protocols that are available to you, this is a non-owned, non-corporation-owned protocol, but it was designed specifically for building automation controls. In addition, it allows for ultimate expandability, and there are many different methods of implementation of BACnet. It's not just one set of wires or one one option to allow you to choose. You get to choose between MSTP, IP, Ethernet. It's all based on what your desires are for your particular situation. BACnet is now up to 612 vendors, okay? 612 vendors worldwide available for you to choose from. Now, from a manufacturer's perspective, that's a great thing for you, because now if I choose BACnet, I know that I'm providing you a product that is likely going to be in your building, because other manufacturers, 611 other manufacturers, are speaking BACnet as well. And not just manufacturers of equipment, we're talking sensors, we're talking lighting control, we're talking metering. There's a lot of different products that we're talking about with 612 vendors. But it gives you the ultimate in choice as to who provides you your solution, whether now or in the future. It also gives us a lot of comfort in knowing we selected a product that is very widely accepted, because now we're not going to necessarily hear as many complaints from the field that you're not speaking the language that I want you to speak. Now, the other piece of that is, because BACnet has become adopted by most, the points list issue is still an issue as far as the definition behind the points, but we have the ability to document every point. So even though it may not necessarily be consistent, though we are working specifically on consistency from product to product, and I believe all manufacturers really are, we have documentation very specific to every piece of equipment with every point available. So there's no secrets. There's no more confusion. It tells you whether it's readable or writable. It tells you the point ID, and then most are dip switch selectable as far as addressing, so you can really make it work for your application. Okay? So now we take all of what we applied, all this knowledge that we've learned from the past. We had the field applied application experience, and we've had the factory installed experience, and we learned all the benefits of factory installed, and we've decided on one open protocol, and that's BACnet. The biggest benefit to you going with something like BACnet as an owner prevents your marriage to any manufacturer and allows you to expand should you decide to add things like metering or lighting in the future. And again, this is a decision you don't have to make when you first build your facility or convert your facility. You can make that decision later. Okay, so from that, we now know what open protocol is, right? But I want to move into the section of what makes an open system open. I want to define an open system, okay? Because to me, open protocol is one piece. All right? Before we go into that, I want to just make sure it's very clear the benefits of BACnet and what it all means. What it all means to you. Well, basic building, you have a piece of equipment with a controller in it that speaks BACnet. That's vendor A. Then we have a BACnet vendor B providing your lighting control, and we have a user interface, and that user interface speaks BACnet, which means all of these products can be brought into the user interface. As you decide to expand your facility, whether you add additional products from vendor A or B, or you add additional vendors' products like vendor C or vendor D, all of those products can be brought back to the same front end, so you as a user don't have to know or don't have to remember all of the little nuances behind how to access or how to control your facility. But this doesn't magically happen. This stuff doesn't just magically talk to that user interface. That user interface has to be programmed to communicate with those additional products. Somebody has to integrate, a term that you've probably heard, somebody has to integrate these products back to this user interface. Okay, so we've eliminated, by providing BACnet, we've eliminated the lack of ability for these products to communicate on the same network. But somebody still has to be involved to integrate those points into this front end. We just talked about BACnet points. We have to have a list of BACnet points, exactly what those BACnet points do, what their values mean, and then that has to be translated and defined or programmed into the user interface. Okay, so with that information, I want to ask you a couple questions. I don't expect you to give me answers, just think through. If you do have an answer and you want to say it, feel free. But first question, is an open communication protocol enough for a control system to be considered open? Open implies the customer has choices, but if the choices are limited to product and not service provider, is it open? Okay, last question. How long do you believe your building control system is going to last? Are you prepared to have the same service provider for that time? I think we all agree that the answer is no. Communication protocol is not enough. Communication protocol is one major piece, and it is a major piece. That is the road that has allowed us to get to a point that we can be potentially open. Without the protocol, we were all going to be proprietary forever, everything. So this protocol was the biggest piece. But now that the protocol, we have selected a protocol, we have BACnet, we need to do more. We need to look at more. What else do we need to look at? Well, first of all, once it's installed, is everything documented? Okay? No matter who your provider is, did they provide you a full sequence of operation for every single product that has been controlled? Have they provided you a complete BACnet points list? Have they provided you an installation operation manual or a service manual so somebody can service that unit if you decide to have somebody else service it? Are you in possession of all the source files and passwords? And this is important. You know, I talked about that front end. Well, that front end has passwords, and if those passwords, the administrative passwords, are contained or maintained by the installer, that means you can't just hire somebody else to integrate a new product to your user interface. You have to hire them, or you have to ask them for the password so somebody else can perform that work. Okay, so these are important things to remember as we look to achieve an open system. As far as service options, if you don't like your current service provider, are there others? Is there a list somewhere of others you can choose? Others that are possibly educated or certified on that particular product? Are there training options available for you if you have a staff that's capable and qualified and actually eager to learn the product? Can they learn it? Can you get your hands on the tools, the actual software to work on that product and that system? Okay, so that moves us into project turnover considerations. And to start project turnover considerations, I wanted to start with a checklist, something that you can take back with you. This presentation, I believe, will be available online for download. You can take this and use it as a very rough guide, a very high-level guide to start with when you're trying to identify the system or potentially specify the system that you want to install in your facility. Okay? So through this section, we're going to talk about the BACnet protocol. All right, we've already identified that that's key, but we'll talk about a couple more things that are very important. We're going to talk about desired features or expandability now and later. We're going to talk about the hardware, the tools, the user interface, training and certification, and then finally that workstation, that user interface. Okay? So why it matters? Well, BACnet protocol, we've already identified 612 vendors. It's a standard built for building automation. Largest protocol in use today. It is extremely expandable. The limits on BACnet as a protocol are enormous. I haven't run into a building or a facility that could not be controlled by BACnet with the networks without having to use necessarily a front end to bring them all together. The key is, and this is very important again, you have to be sure that you request that completes points list. Okay? Let's say you have a front end installed and you decide that the front end is not serving your needs, not meeting your needs, or maybe the front end turns out that there is only one person that can service that front end for your facility and you decide you need to replace that front end. If you need to replace the front end or if you need to have somebody integrate with the front end and expand its capabilities, without this points list, you may be dead in the water. Okay? So it's very important to know that points list, have it on hand, and know which points are read-write, the addresses of the devices. Okay? Knowing your needs now and later, and this is very, very important. Okay, we always build facilities and we think about today. We have in the specification today what we need in that building today. And then a lot of times what happens is during the bid process, funding becomes scarce and we have to start reducing features. It doesn't mean the owner didn't want those features. That just means that they couldn't necessarily afford them today. But why not be able to add those features later if the opportunity exists? So it's very important to know those features that are desired long-term and identify them so that your system is built with the capability of being expanded. And that this doesn't necessarily have to mean additional cost. The point is, it could mean that you are selecting a product that is not necessarily as expandable as you desire. So here's an example. Let's say that we built a facility and that facility has some zoning and that's all you're going to put in today. So a zoning contractor might say, okay, fine, I'll provide a quote for a low-cost zoning product and that will meet the needs. But the owner has a desire to add a user interface later. Well, not all zoning products may have that capability. So if you didn't inform the installer that this was a plan later down the line, you may not have that capability and you may have to scrap that zoning system. You may have to completely remove it in order to get this feature by putting another system in. Now let's say down the road you plan to buy another facility, expand your facility, and you want to add that facility to the same user interface. It's important again to know that your user interface has the capability of performing that function, of talking through the IP network from building to building, whether it's across the parking lot or around the world. Not all systems will have that capability. Did you have a question? Oh, okay. Okay. So then we move to hardware tools, programming, and education. This is the piece that will help prevent the marriage to your installer. And this is very important because if you don't identify this up front, if you don't make sure that you have this data up front, you may wake up one day and realize that you married your installing contractor. Okay? And that may not necessarily be the right situation for you. Okay? You need to make sure that the product is available to any contractor of your choice. Okay? Some manufacturers provide products that may have the same name, but they're available. There's two different product lines with the same name. One's available to contractors, and one's only available to the branch offices or the factory offices. This is important to understand because if you buy the product that is only available to factory offices, you may be stuck with that factory office servicing your facility. Most manufacturers have two product lines. So we also want to limit the custom programs, and that's important. Why do we want to limit the custom programs? Well, anything that's custom means that only the person that wrote the program truly understands how that program works. That's not to say somebody else can't figure it out, but you may pay heavily to have somebody else figure that out. Ensuring you have competitive servicing options. All right? What happens if you don't like your servicing option? How do you find somebody else? Can you get a list somewhere of other servicing options? And then eliminate the finger pointing and the double charges of same contractor, mechanical, and controls are providing multiple services. Okay? Many times, because we have two different providers, one providing controls, one providing equipment, we have to have two different service providers. That's not necessarily a requirement. If you have the right system, if you feel your mechanical contractor can service the controls or wants to, if they have the ability to go get the education and the tools, they can do that. They should be able to do that. And same thing for the branch office. I'm not saying branch offices are bad. You may want the ability for that branch office to service it and service the equipment. But it should be your choice. Okay, and then the workstation. And again, I talk about this. This is really what's going to help prevent that forced marriage to the installer of the front end. Okay? We talked about this network. If we really want to realize this network long term, this is going to be extremely important. Those administrative passwords, licensing, as far as what licensing is required, is there an annual renewal fee? Is it something that you feel is something you're going to be willing to tolerate long term? How expandable is the current version if needed? Can third-party points be added? And this is also important. We talk about vendor A, vendor B, vendor C, but those are all considered third-party points to the provider of the front end. So is that front end capable of communicating to third-party points, or does it need to be enhanced or possibly replaced with a beefier model? And then does it cover the expected features? Know the features you want in advance. Do you need special reporting? Do you need email alarming? Do you need remote access? Do you want to access this system with your iPhone or your Android phone? Is that an important thing to you? Because if those are important features to you, you should know that up front and make sure it's clearly identified, because not all systems can provide that, or there may be an additional cost in order to achieve that. Okay, so with that, I open the floor to questions. Yes?
Is it uncommon to have two providers?
No. It's not uncommon to have two providers. The challenge you may have with two providers is defining which functions are specific to which provider. Because as you create overlap, you also create gray area, and that could add to additional cost or change orders during the project. So multiple providers are not a bad thing. It's just about clear definition as to what each provider needs to provide. Yes?
What is IP and MSTP?
MSTP, I'm glad you said that. That's another acronym I didn't define. MSTP stands for Master Slave Token Pass. Basically, that is the common network that is used in BACnet at the controller level. It's a two-wire COM bus, where IP is the Ethernet cable. Okay? Any other questions? Yes?
Where do you see it going in the next 5 to 10 years? One of the things that I've kind of been waiting for is, and we'll call it plug and play. You buy a new piece of equipment, you hook it up, plug it into the network, and have your control program recognize it, automatically configure. Is that something we can look forward to? Something that's on the horizon?
It is something that actually exists today. However, it typically exists within a manufacturer's product and front end. For example, if you buy I'm sorry, forgot about the microphone. If you buy my hardware and my front end, you plug the two wires together. My front end will go out and find the hardware, automatically pull it in, bring the graphics in, bring the protocol in, the point mapping in, the trend data in. That's all automatic. So there is plug and play today, but I wouldn't say that it exists across multiple vendors yet. So is it possible? I do believe it's possible, but I don't know that the definition exists yet to achieve that. Good question. Yes?
Where can I go myself, and where can I send my guys to start learning about BACnet? And just at the lowest level, I know it's just protocol, but what will it run on? Will it run on just a regular network? Does that network have to be isolated? So where can we learn about it?
The best way that I can answer that, because I don't want to make assumptions. There are probably schools available that do teach generically BACnet, but most often what you're going to find is BACnet networking is taught with product training. So it's usually tied to the hardware. And the reason you'll find that is not necessarily every manufacturer will use the same specification of wires. Some may find that they want to beef it up because they want to prevent one problem, or some may thin it down to because they feel comfortable that their hardware can communicate with that cabling. So I would say that your best place to start, if you have a particular hardware product in mind, start with the manufacturer of that hardware product, because usually the BACnet networking is going to be tied to the hardware education today. That's not to say that there are not courses available, and as far as I know, we are working regularly to try to define generic classes so that people can just learn about the networking and feel comfortable with that. Yes?
Can you mix a Wi-Fi and a hardwired system?
Well, Wi-Fi, you mean as far as BACnet is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, I have some sites that are like half a mile away from where the front end would be. And some of the buildings are wired. It's a 16-building complex, and some of the buildings are wired, and others aren't. And I'm just trying to determine how I'm going to get wires from point A to point B. I was wondering if I could do it wireless.
There are wireless solutions besides Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, I don't know, would have the right range for you. But if your building has internet access, there's a solution for you. If your building does not have internet access, there could be a wireless solution for you. Depends on distance, line of sight, what type of items could be in the way.
And could you mix the two?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, you think about it the same way. The BACnet IP protocol works very similarly to your computer connected to the internet. So you're going to get the same data when you plug the computer in versus walking around wirelessly with your computer. There might be some timing issues that have to be worked out, but nonetheless it should work. Or it should be possible. Say that.
Will it work off of fiber?
Yes, definitely. Oh, sorry. The question was, can you mix hardwired IP networks and Wi-Fi networks? And the answer would be yes, as long as you have internet access at that property or facility, you should be able to communicate via BACnet. There may be some timing issues that have to be worked out, but it's definitely possible. Yes?
I was just going to share, a colleague of mine was even able to integrate a BACnet system using a cell phone carrier mobile hotspot.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was doing a vineyard, and there wasn't any way to communicate with him half a mile. So he's able to set up that little cell phone hotspot and run an entire vineyard using a BACnet.
It's a very good point. It's something that I used to do very regularly with one of my customers in particular. I had a BACnet success story last year published, was Crate and Barrel. And we would quite regularly install projects that were remote. They didn't get internet at those projects till the very, very end of the project. But once I left the system commissioned, I wanted to have access to it from Chicago. So I would leave a Sprint air card in a Cradlepoint Wi-Fi router, and that Cradlepoint router would look for an internet connection from the hardwire, and if that didn't exist, it would go to the cellular tower. Either way, I had access to the facility live. I had it during commissioning. I had it before commissioning. It was really, really impressive, and that's just goes to show you the flexibility that you can really achieve with BACnet. Yes?
I've had a couple of issues where I have wireless routers on my BACnet, the IP part,
Mm-hmm.
protocol part, and I have times when those wireless routers will like jam up the whole system, and I'll start getting bad data from the building automation system.
Really?
Is that
Well, if you're getting bad data from the building automation system, I'm guessing that you're also having some other packet collisions occurring on that IP network, and so you may have a bigger problem that needs to be addressed. The thing to remember is hardwired is always the best way. It really is. Unless you have to go wireless, the amount of money you may spend servicing the wireless long term is going to far out cost you compared to wiring it up front. I've used a lot of wireless technology. I've used wireless sensors. I've used wireless communication. I've always gone back to hardwired because at the end of the day, if the sensor is wireless and it provides me convenience, but suddenly loses its signal for 5 minutes, my heat turns on and the building is lost, 5 minutes of loss of sensor causes hours of loss of comfort, and hours of loss of comfort leads to hours of lost profit. So hardwired is definitely my personal recommendation to always fall back on. Wireless would be the backup plan. Yes?
Since BACnet into the government security systems, we've had problems with protocols. Our IT guy says the protocols are not accepted, you cannot use our internet, and we would have to go through a wireless.
I see. Well, in that case, that's kind of where the MSTP, the benefits of MSTP come from, because MSTP isolates the communication to a BACnet COM bus. It's not on the Ethernet backbone in the building or the IP backbone in the building, okay? What we typically do is we keep everything MSTP, and only at our higher level controllers or the user interface we go back to Ethernet. But at that point, we've had customers, we have security documents and it shows everything secure and everybody believes in it and is warm and fuzzy, but every once in a while you have a customer who says, it's just not worth the risk to me. I don't want a foreign device that I have very little information on or no definition as far as I'm concerned on my network. So at that point, we can put it to a dedicated machine, or we'll put it to a private DSL line. So this way you can access it, but it's not residing on that network. So your IT department is happy and you're happy. You get what you want, they got what they want. But that's where I say that's, to me, the great benefit of BACnet is there are many ways to implement it. So if your IT department is giving you trouble, you can look at one of the other avenues, like Wi-Fi in that case. That's great.
The trouble is, the government has both phone lines and internet.
Gotcha. And you, when you say wireless, you use the wireless air cards. Okay. Not Wi-Fi, but actually mobile wireless, like Sprint, AT&T, Verizon. Okay, that's very good to know.
Oh, and I'm lucky. I work on a government base too, and our controls on the BACnet, half the buildings have internet connection, so you can read it on the front end, and the other half are all standalone. You know, controls are all in there, but you actually got to physically go to the buildings and log in at the building. That's a pain in the ass.
If you can, well, that's something then to really look at. If you can get approval to get some air cards in that facility, that could really provide you a solution to your current problem. The benefit of a communicating network is eliminated if you can't communicate to it. That's where I say the nice part about BACnet is that there are many, many methods to get it. Look into with your provider to see if there are opportunities for you to maybe use an air card. Yes?
Just give you some background too. I know where these guys are coming from. My son is IT in the Air Force. He's one of the bad guys. He's not even allowed to carry his cell phone to work because that's their level. Putting one of these mobile hotspot cards or something in there, no, I just don't think they go with that. There's just some things that we have to agree to disagree on and
Yeah.
accept and carry our little laptop to the building so we can go reprogram.
Absolutely. For now, till one day it becomes an emergency and then suddenly all the protocols go out the window and they say, fine, put it on. It's like anything. You're only as important as you need to be, right?
To me, it defeats the whole purpose of having the controls there if you can't access it from a front end in your building.
Absolutely.
I look at it from the point of using it for troubleshooting. The guys at the shop can get online, look up the building through the BACnet, see what's going on, or they have to go out to it.
But they see it as a potential security breach.
Yeah.
All you have to do is have one organization out there go in and play havoc with your air conditioning on a server room in one of these government facilities. And the only way they can secure that server room is to make sure nobody can operate from the outside.
And that might even be a half solution. You know, you talk to your IT department and find out if their concern is just the data server or the data room. Perhaps you isolate that, and that is its own network within its own little facility, and maybe the IT department is who maintains that, or at least has access to it locally. So there are many opportunities to implement it if you can work through that with your group. Doesn't sound like it's going to happen, but you never know. Yes.
Aside from lightning and power surges, are there anything
As far as protection is concerned, there could be some benefits to a battery backup within the hardware if the battery backup is only performing like I'll say non-important function, not necessarily data storage or data backup. You want to have something that has volatile memory so that it burns the image of the information into the controller. But on a loss of power, perhaps the battery would be a benefit to you from a time perspective.
Well, I was gonna put it up, UPS.
Sure.
Yeah.
Then outside of those two items, I think those are the two most common and the two most important. Any more? Okay. Well, I want to say thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it. If you have any other questions, I'll be here for a few more minutes before I have to head out to catch my plane. But again, my name is Dominic Eorio. I really appreciate you all coming by. Thank you.